Imagine walking into a dealership to buy a new Honda CR-V, expecting to pay $35,000, only to find out the price has jumped to nearly $44,000 overnight. That's the reality many Americans could soon face as President Trump launches a new trade war, imposing massive tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. On March 4, 2025, Trump announced a 25% tariff on Canadian and Mexican imports and double tariffs on Chinese goods from 10% to 20%. His administration claims this move will protect American jobs, strengthen domestic industries, and curb illegal trade practices. But in reality, these tariffs are set to drive up prices on essential goods, hitting everyday consumers the hardest. Take auto parts, for example. Canada and Mexico are major suppliers to American car manufacturers, providing everything from steel frames to electronic components. With these new tariffs in place, companies like Honda and Toyota will be forced to raise their prices, passing the extra costs on to buyers. A Honda CR-V that once cost $35,000 could now come with an additional $8,750 in tariffs, bringing the total price to a staggering $43,750. And it's not just cars. The cost of lumber, steel, pharmaceuticals, pork, beef, and wheat is also set to rise, impacting everything from home construction to grocery bills. In a surprise move, Trump later announced a temporary delay on some of these tariffs, but only for American auto giants GM, Ford, and Stellantis. This decision sparked immediate backlash, with critics arguing that it unfairly favors domestic car makers while putting foreign brands and their American workers at a competitive disadvantage. So, what's the real motivation behind these tariffs? Are they truly about protecting American industry, or is there something bigger at play? Let's break it all down. Trump has framed these new tariffs as a way to combat the fentanyl crisis and secure America's borders. According to his administration, tougher trade policies will pressure Canada and Mexico to crack down on drug trafficking, particularly the smuggling of fentanyl into the U.S. But do the numbers actually support this claim? In 2024, a staggering 97% of all fentanyl seized at U.S. borders came from Mexico, amounting to 21,148 pounds of the deadly drug. Meanwhile, Canada accounted for just 0.2% of fentanyl seizures, with only 43 pounds intercepted. Despite this, Trump has placed Canada in the same category as Mexico when it comes to trade restrictions, raising questions about the true intent behind these tariffs. Canada has been quick to respond, launching a $1.3 billion border security initiative aimed at curbing drug trafficking. This plan includes increased personnel at key border crossings, advanced surveillance technology, including drones, a newly appointed fentanyl czar to coordinate anti-drug efforts. Mexico, under mounting pressure from the U.S., has deployed 10,000 soldiers to its northern border in an attempt to slow the flow of fentanyl and illegal crossings. And the results? Trump's policies have already led to a record drop in illegal border crossings. Under Biden in February 2024, U.S. border agents reported 189,913 illegal crossings. But just 1 year later, under Trump's new policies, that number plummeted to 8,326, the lowest in modern U.S. history. But despite this success in border security, many experts argue that tariffs may not be the right tool for tackling drug trafficking. Instead of directly addressing cartel operations, these trade restrictions risk damaging relationships with key U.S. allies and driving up costs for American consumers. So if fighting fentanyl isn't the real goal, what is? Many believe these tariffs are actually part of Trump's broader plan to bring manufacturing back to America, forcing companies to rethink their reliance on foreign supply chains. Let's take a closer look. While Trump has framed the tariffs as a strategy to combat fentanyl trafficking and secure the border, many experts argue that the real motivation is to force companies to bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. Trump has long been critical of outsourcing in foreign supply chains, believing that America should be self-reliant in key industries like automotive, technology, and pharmaceuticals. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed how vulnerable U.S. supply chains were, with shortages of medical supplies, semiconductors, and even basic consumer goods. Now, Trump's administration is using trade restrictions to push companies to relocate factories to the U.S., reducing dependence on foreign production. And it's already working. Honda recently announced it will shift production of its Civic Hybrid from Mexico to Indiana, a direct response to the new tariffs. Other automakers are now weighing similar moves, as the cost of importing vehicles and parts from Mexico has skyrocketed due to the 25% tariff hike. This is exactly what Trump wants: manufacturing jobs returning to the U.S., boosting American industry, and reducing reliance on Canada, Mexico, and China. But his aggressive approach isn't just about economics. It's also a power play in U.S.-Canada relations. Trump has made controversial remarks about Canada, joking that it should become the 51st U.S. state. He has even referred to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as Governor Trudeau, implying that Canada is more of a subordinate region than an independent country. Naturally, Trudeau isn't taking these comments lightly. In response to Trump's tariffs and rhetoric, Canada is hitting back with its own economic countermeasures, setting the stage for an escalating trade war. Let's take a look at how Canada and Mexico are fighting back. Trump's aggressive tariffs have sparked a massive backlash from Canada and Mexico, with both countries responding swiftly to protect their economies. In retaliation, Canada has imposed $155 billion in counter-tariffs on U.S. goods, targeting key American industries. The tariffs are designed to hit back where it hurts, on products that heavily rely on Canadian consumers, such as U.S. agricultural exports, cars, and household goods. At the same time, a Buy Canadian movement is surging across the country. Fast food chains like Harvey's are proudly displaying Canadian flags, encouraging customers to support local businesses instead of American brands. Grocery stores are replacing California wines with Canadian alcohol, while supermarkets are shifting away from U.S. food imports in favor of homegrown alternatives. But Canada isn't stopping there. Chrystia Freeland, Trudeau's successor, has announced a 100% tariff on Tesla imports, effectively doubling the cost of American-made Teslas in Canada. This move is seen as both a warning shot to Washington and an effort to push Canada's own electric vehicle industry forward. Perhaps the most drastic retaliation comes from Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who has threatened to cut off electricity exports to key U.S. states like Michigan, New York, and Minnesota. Ontario supplies a significant portion of the power used in these states, and any disruption could cause massive price spikes and energy shortages, adding even more pressure on the U.S. economy. As tensions rise, Mexico is also stepping up its response. With nearly 80% of its exports going to the U.S., Mexico is looking for new trade partners while taking measures to counteract Trump's tariffs. But how much damage could this trade war really cause? Let's break down the economic impact. With tariffs escalating on all sides, the question remains, who actually wins this trade war? On paper, the United States holds the advantage, thanks to a significant trade imbalance that favors American interests. Here's why. 76% of Canada's exports go to the U.S., making up 18% of Canada's total GDP. 78% of Mexico's exports also head to the U.S., accounting for a massive 30% of Mexico's GDP. Meanwhile, the U.S. is far less dependent on its neighbors. Only 17% of U.S. exports go to Canada, and 16% go to Mexico. Even when combined, Canada and Mexico make up just 2% of the U.S. economy, meaning the American market could absorb the impact of these tariffs far more easily than its trading partners. This puts Canada and Mexico in a weaker position, as both economies rely heavily on U.S. consumers. If American companies shift supply chains away from these countries, factories in Ontario and Nuevo Leon could shut down, leading to job losses and economic contraction. But the U.S. isn't immune to the consequences. Tariffs create inflationary pressure, and everyday Americans will start to feel the pinch in multiple ways. Car prices will rise, especially for vehicles with foreign-made components. This will drive higher demand for used cars, which are already expensive. Used car prices will surge, making maintenance costs increase. As demand for repairs grows, mechanics will start charging more. Higher wages in one industry, due to labor shortages, will cause a ripple effect across the economy, as businesses adjust their pricing to keep up. End result? A cost of living spike that could lead to economic slowdown, with consumers spending more on essentials and cutting back on discretionary purchases. So while the U.S. may hold the upper hand in terms of trade leverage, the American consumer could be the real loser in this battle. Prices will rise, businesses will struggle with higher costs, and inflation could become a major concern, forcing the Federal Reserve to step in. This brings us to the next big question. Will the Fed raise interest rates, or will Trump be forced to backtrack like he did in 2018? Let's take a look at what happens next. As prices continue to climb, the Federal Reserve could be forced to step in. If inflation spikes due to higher import costs, supply chain disruptions, and rising wages, the Fed may have no choice but to raise interest rates to cool down the economy. Higher interest rates would make borrowing more expensive for businesses and consumers alike. This means auto loans become pricier, making it harder for Americans to buy new cars. Mortgage rates increase, slowing down the housing market. Business loans get more expensive, potentially discouraging companies from expanding or hiring new workers. If this cycle continues, the very tariffs meant to boost American industry could actually weaken the economy by driving up costs and stalling growth. Trump has reversed course on tariffs before. In 2018, his administration imposed steel and aluminum tariffs, only to lift them a year later due to pressure from businesses and rising costs. If inflation gets out of control, could Trump roll back these new tariffs just as quickly? The real question is, will Trump's tariffs strengthen the U.S. economy by forcing companies to bring jobs back? Or will they backfire by fueling inflation and job losses? What do you think? Will these policies work, or are we headed for economic trouble? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on global trade wars, economic trends, and political shifts, make sure to like this video, share it with others, and hit that subscribe button so you never miss a deep dive into the world.